Hello and welcome to ScrapbookPal YouTube channel. I'm Jill of Jill Cameron Creations. Christmas crafting is right around the corner and I wanted to make it a little bit easier for you to make a bunch of Christmas cards all at once. We are using the Pinkfresh Holiday Elements Stamp, Stencil, and Die Set. This of course is meant to be stamped, stenciled, and die cut all at one time. Now I mentioned that we were making Christmas cards in batches kind of thing, and I wasn't able to do that without a stamping platform. So I went ahead and I cut my wreath off the top of this. I can put it back together if I have a stamping platform later that is big enough, or a stamping block that's big enough. I can put it all back together on the block and still do the exact same thing. But for this, I literally just stamped it, and then I'm going to do all of my stenciling. The stenciling colors that I'm using: Candied Apple, Aged Mahogany, Rustic Wilderness, Forest Moss, Walnut Stain, Fossilized Amber, and Pumice Stone. Those are all the colors that I used for all of the images on the stamp. The ink blending brushes that I'm using are the mini ones from Altenew. Splitting the image also allowed me to just be able to hold the stencil down instead of having to tape it down or secure it in any way. It was really easy to hold down. It also allowed me to kind of adjust my stencil in some places. When you pull your stamp off, it does sometimes get some of the alignment just a shade off, and this allowed me to have a little bit more control over that alignment. I used Walnut Stain as my darkest red color, but I also went back over that Walnut Stain with the red, so it gave it more of a red tint, and that's one thing I really love about Distress Oxide inks, or even Distress inks. And you could also achieve that same look with dye inks. I just happened to have all of those colors that I wanted to use in Distress Oxide ink, so that's what I used. And they also give really great coverage, and I wanted that thick, heavy coverage. While I'm finishing up our stenciling here, let's talk a little bit about the cards. I'm doing 5.5 by 5.5 finished size cards, but we're going to do a little bit of paper layering so that we get some simple but beautiful cards. So that last color here is our Rustic Wilderness and our stenciling, and that's going to finish that off, and then I can just run that through my die cutting machine and die cut it out just like I normally would. In that Rustic Wilderness, it looks so yellow when you see through it, but it's really green. It's a beautiful color. Isn't that pretty? So now I can actually go and put this back in my stamp platform, my Misty, and stamp on it and get those lines to really pop. So here are our card bases. They're 5.5 by 5.5 finished size. Now we're going to use our scoreboard here to create lines on some 4 by 4 inch paper. This is just white cardstock. I'm doing straight lines across some of them. I'm doing a frame around one of them. This is the one I did the frame around, and it's at 4, and I did 1/4 of an inch in and 1/4 of an inch in for the frame. Really simple. And then for one, I'm just doing lines all the way across the paper every 1/4 of an inch. For one, I did 4 or 5 lines at the bottom every 1/4 of an inch. Some of these I'm going to trim down so that I can put a black mat behind them, and just making lines on this to give it texture without having to pull out yet another tool or find an embossing folder that I liked that looked good with all of this. It's something simple that you can do very quickly, that you have on hand already, not something else that requires a lot of patience and or skill. This one I did a plaid background. This one probably took the longest because I did 1/4 of an inch all the way around so that it was a plaid. You see me turn the paper so that I can work from that outside edge in, because it's a lot easier than working from the edge of that scoreboard all the way in. Now I'm going to figure out how to put together all of my images here. I die cut and stamped all of them, so I have all these different images, and I can do sentiments in different ways on here, just reinforcing the fold line on those card bases. And for our sentiments, I'm going to use some of the scrap paper. Now my card base is just a craft card, and I'm using all the same sentiments from the stamp set itself. Some of them I'm going to stamp in directly on the panel. Some I'm going to white heat emboss. One I'm going to do platinum heat embossing, and I actually messed it up because I didn't melt it all the way, but I left it in here anyway. Now I'm just going to trim these down, and some of them I'm going to pop up with little foam squares, and some of them I'm just going to leave it flat right on the paper. Just wanted to have a little bit more with this. It was a little plain, so I went ahead and I'm going to trim this down so that I can put a black mat behind that white cardstock. So that black mat's going to sit between my card base and our white cardstock here. Just trimming off 1/4 of an inch so that it is even all the way around, and a little bit of glue, and we'll pop this up, and that will be that. That will be that card. Next card we're going to do is our one with the poinsettia on it, and I'm going to stamp this one directly on there. This one has the frame around it, so we're going to be able to see where that is on the card here in just a second when I pick it up. And this is a platinum embossing powder, so it's not quite gold, it's not quite silver, it's just really, really pretty. We're not going to put a border around this one. We're just going to leave this one flat, and you can see I went back and did that heat embossing again to get that to melt all the way, because I felt it. Next one we're going to do is our little packages, and when I set them down on here, I set them off a little too far to the right. So to off balance that and make sure that you can that you don't really notice it, I'm going to offset my sentiment at the top of it, and we're going to stamp that on a different the Desert Storm cardstock there and put that at the top. 4 really simple cards. The last one that we're going to do, of course, will be the Wreath card with the little elf and another little set of packages on it. And I really like the elf card with the wreath, is probably my favorite. And of course, you could stamp and do all of the cards exactly the same if you wanted to. That would be super duper easy, especially if you cut that stamp and then die cut it out. That would be so easy to do. So I tried it on there and I was like, it's a little long and I don't want that centered. So I just chopped off the ends of it a little bit more and popped some foam tape on that, and that's going to be that one. I'm just cutting up my foam tape in littler pieces there for the piece that I had. Put it over here to the side, and you don't notice that the packages aren't centered near as much. So now we're going to do this last one, and yeah, the flowers are meant to go more towards the bottom, but I really liked this at the top so that I could glue my packages and my elf down. You could of course pop this up with foam tape if you wanted to, but I did not want to do that. I wanted to leave those little boogers flat laying down there. We're going to put our sentiment in the center next to our package and our elf there, and we're going to white heat emboss that as well on our Desert Storm craft colored environmental cardstock. There's like 12 million names for that cardstock, and I think it's craft environmental, maybe, I think. Anyway, we're going to trim this down super, super small, but still even all the way around. And we're going to pop that up with a little bit of foam tape there in the middle. And this is the background that is the checkerboard all the way around. Gives just a little bit of texture in the background. And we're going to pop that up with some foam tape there. Now to finish this off, I did want to go ahead and add a few little drops of some golds. This is that vintage Nuvo drops, and it's Gilded Gold is the name of them. And then I also pulled out a few little drops from the Glitter Gold Coast and just added a few drops on top of the yellow there. And I think that's all the additions that I did. So those are all the little cards that we made pretty quickly. I made all of those in less than 30 minutes. Thank you for joining me today. It's been a pleasure for being on the ScrapbookPal YouTube design team. Y'all have a great day.